So, like many people, perhaps some of you, my earliest memories, and most likely my fondest memories of Easter, have very little to do with church, or with Jesus, even. Now, I knew the Easter story, of course. My parents were big fans of the musical Jesus Christ Superstar. I assume some of you have seen it. And my own natural interest in world religions and in the Bible had started relatively early. But if you were to ask me about my best early memories of Easter, I would tell you that they involved going to my grandparents' farm and racing rubber ducks with my extended family down the small creek that divided the property. Now, I don't remember who won each year. I assume if I had won, I would remember. So let's just cross me right off the list. But usually at this time of year, the creek expanded its banks, either from the spring runoff or the April showers. And I remember chasing the ducks in the current with both adults and children, splashing through the muck on the bank and rejoicing at the end of the snow and the ice and the dark of winter. And maybe that is why, for me, the story of the resurrection, at least in its broad strokes, made perfect sense. At the same time that we celebrate this holiday of Easter, we find ourselves in a wet and fertile world, finally warming up again, and in the midst of apparently new life that, of course, we recognize frequently as actually being the return of old life, part of an eternal cycle of nature. So yes, in its broad strokes, the resurrection made sense, and in its broad strokes, it still makes sense to me. And in my family, made up of unchurched people, lapsed Catholics, and members of low church Protestant communities like the Quakers and the Congregationalists, who historically were late to the Easter game. In my family, the broad strokes were all that we needed to celebrate some variation of an ancient holiday, most likely as old as humanity itself. But the story of Easter and the resurrection, much like the stories of other religious holidays, suffers a bit from a human need. A human need to prove the veracity of particulars. A human need for certainty, for a formula, for a recipe of true belief that will somehow make sense of no less than our lives, no less than our worlds. This urge toward measurable certainty tries to make ancient stories with their resurrections and their reincarnations flat and shallow instead of round and deep. It tries to make them linear, like life, the way we perceive it, with a clear beginning and a clear end. But here's the thing. These stories, these ancient stories, weren't designed to be understood that way. They stand against easy explanation and quantification, as they are rich in magic and miracle, which we human beings find hard to digest. Now, this digestion problem feels modern, but it is an ancient problem too. Humans have always felt nervous facing the great vastness of the unknown. After all, the women in our reading found only confusion in the two. So while much in our regular lives at least seems on the surface to be absolute, and we cling to it when we can, we suspect that the truth that we adhere to isn't as cut and dry as we would like. Science gives us facts that we hold on to until they are disproven by better science. Modern trade provides money which is quantifiable and countable and even touchable until it's not. National and regional identities give people a sense of cultural sameness and security until diversity challenges that understanding. And the modern family, I think we're all members of modern families, the modern family provides us with unassailable connections and clearly defined roles, except that it really, really doesn't. It turns out that much of what we think of as unassailable and true evolves over time. And all this assuredness we think we have is an illusion. An illusion. In a society that values facts and measurable truths over wonder, beauty, and ambiguity, and treats these apparent sureties as islands we can hop to in the midst of the constantly changing streams of life. So naturally, in this state of flux, for some of us, what we wish for from our faith, whether it is an established institutional one or one of our own devising, is that assurance of eternal, measurable truth, a beginning and an ending, for better or for worse. A beginning and an ending, for better or for worse. Except that the idea of resurrection, does not provide that sort of answer. And neither does the church, or at least the Eliot Church. Certainly some other traditions have tried to assert their strength and resolve in cathedral architecture or the bedrock of ancient creeds. But if that is the church you are looking for, you came to the wrong place on Easter morning. We do not have creeds here. We have a covenantal relationship, not of thought or belief, but of action, where in the love of truth and in the spirit of that great teacher, Jesus, we come together for worship and for service. So our task in this place, in this covenantal community built on diversity, our task, when confronted with the story of the resurrection, is not to parse it out or break it down into its component parts to see what is or isn't true, what is possible or impossible, but instead to let the story impact us, to speak to us from its time and its context to our time and our context. And as we do this, we keep in mind the lesson from the Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh that we refer to often here, that we are human beings, that we human beings are merely waves that forget they are part of the ocean. Luke says that Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home. Amazed, the Bible says, amazed at what had happened. Like Peter, we must learn in this world of apparent certainties to value the amazing mystery. The amazing mystery of life, death, and new life. This ability to be amazed is a key part of the path of faith. Many of us here, myself included, pride ourselves on our ability to reason, on our sound judgment and our cynicism. But while these are important skills for making sense of the world around us, they are not helpful. They are not helpful if we lose our ability to be moved by the wonders we discover. The 19th century Unitarian minister and theologian William Ellery Channing declared that the free mind resists the bondage of habit, does not mechanically copy the past, nor live in its old virtues, but listens. But listens, he says, for new and higher monitions of conscience, and rejoices to pour itself forth in fresh and higher exertions. And we here try to do this. We try to cultivate the free mind. Even when the task-based lives we lead keep us in our lanes, force us back into this mundane world where fantasy and imagination are reserved for children and eccentrics. Fact is, in the place where we live, here, in the place where we live, there is so much to make us unsure, tentative, suspicious. In the real world, in the adult world, we are not meant to be open to others, to seek love and connection and compromise and peace in the midst of disagreements. Because for so many people, that openness is seen as weakness, as a path to worldly failures best not taken seriously. And for this reason, for us, the story of the resurrection is a story of resistance. It is a story of resistance to, calling us back out of our dogmatic slumbers, giving us the confidence to confront what we fear, to break down the walls that we have erected and to turn off our usual roads into places in our hearts that we thought we had closed. Why, Luke's story asks, why do you search for the living among the dead? Why do you search for the living among the dead? Whatever else it may be, the Easter story is a reminder that good dreams do not die. Good dreams do not die. They are still among the living. The resurrection, in fact, is ripe for exploration. Exploration of the childlike joy we find racing ducks downstream, participating in the new life bursting up in and around us. Exploration of the memory of better times, or of the goals that we have not let die, or of newfound energy and hope even when we cannot explain its rising. In our reading today, Reverend Daniel Budd tells us that we know that somehow in our hearts and souls, resurrection is real. Resurrection is real. Not that of the body, but of the spirit. A spirit renewed, even reborn in the midst of our lives and our living. We are at our most human. We are most authentically ourselves when we lean into that spirit of renewal and of rebirth. The resurrection, our resurrection, is worth exploring in its fullness, even if it is not quantifiable, even if we are unsure of its meaning or even of its presence. For when we set aside our questions to just be, to feel, to mourn, and to celebrate with the open hearts and minds that we have been given for this purpose, we can rejoice this Easter day. And every day we are born anew. Amen.